What's going on, guys? We are live, finally. For some reason, I thought my camera was acting up, but it turned out just to be StreamYard. Let me know in the chat everything's going all right, because I haven't streamed from StreamYard in a bit. So I'm assuming everything is good, but it's hard to say for certain. But yeah, we're gonna have a impromptu guest. And I can put cameras up. I can put text up. Special guest Mike Chandler. No, absolutely not. What a bum of a thing. What an absolute bum of a thing. I haven't done this in a while. I paid for StreamYard for like 2 years now, and luckily I paused it last time I used it. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? What's up, Andy? What's going on? Shout out Andy. What's going on? What's going on? C4 San Diego. Special guest should be joining at some point here. Okay, I wanted to get on. I literally restarted my computer, but it was literally a setting. It was legit just a setting. So we put this together in the last 30 minutes. I just talked to this person. I said, hey, would you like to come on the channel? I could just see they just joined right now. So I'm putting my headphones on. So we have a very, very special guest for the first time on the live stream on the channel. We've had him on the channel before. We have Kevin Ioli. What's going on, Kevin?
What's up, Joey? How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Been a busy week, but and hopefully I will have Dana White tonight. It's been kind of a crazy week trying to get him, but hopefully that'll happen tonight.
Are you going to do an interview with him later tonight? Is the plan?
Well, the plan was to do it yesterday, and apparently he got into the arena and got lost, and so it didn't happen. And I sat there for like 3 hours waiting. And then now the plan is today sometime, so I'm thinking around, 9 o'clock Pacific time. That's my hope, that it happens that way, or maybe a little bit earlier than that.
Yeah, I feel like we talked about it a while, like maybe it was last pay-per-view, something similar like that was happening. It kept getting changed around or something along those lines.
Yeah, what's happened in the last, since he took on this board job at Meta, and he's had a couple other things that he's doing, like his time is like way less than it used to be, right?
It used to be.
And so like I was supposed to get him in New York on, I think it was a Tuesday before the Jon Jones fight, and there was like, in fact, he signed on Tuesday. Like we got on the StreamYard, we were about to start, and then all of a sudden somebody came in and whispered to him, and he said, "I got to go. I'll come back on." Right, and that whole week like sort of went like that. At 3:10, I didn't get him until Friday of fight week. Right, 3:11 did not get him at all. So it's been one of those things. Like I've been really trying, and even though he says he's been saying yes every time, carving out a half an hour out of his schedule is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, I can imagine with UFC, all the interviews. I feel like he does, I've noticed, because I try to pay attention, because sometimes I feel like there's little itty bits of information you can get from Dana, like from some of the, he does all like the local interviews sometimes that don't get a lot of views, and sometimes you don't see it on the social media accounts. I feel like you see him there, so I can't imagine when he's just going all those back to back to back, how much time that must take. It's crazy.
Yeah, like what a lot of times he will do was do people from his office like on a Monday or Tuesday of a fight week, and he'll have usually the partners, their TV partners, me and some other people that he does on a regular basis, and he'll just go boom, 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 boom. But then when he gets to fight week and he's actually at the venue, especially outside of Las Vegas, his schedule's a little different in Las Vegas, but when he's outside of Las Vegas, he gets to the venue and then he's willing to talk to all the reporters who were there. And so, and of course, like, I don't have no problem with that. That has to be a priority. If you travel to Australia, or if you're from Australia and this is your only chance to see, an interview Dana White in person, you certainly deserve that. So given that, yesterday, like I thought when I was supposed to get him, I was going to get him before the press conference started. Well, apparently he got there. Somebody saw him and asked him a question. He started to do an interview, a scrum ensued. And then, he just went through all the time that was going to be used for my interview to do that. So, it's like Dana's good to me with his time. And so I don't have any complaints about it.
Yeah. So I was texting you about, it was one of the articles you had written about Sean Strickland. And I was like, man, this is facts. I had sent you a screenshot. For those of you guys don't know, I only jumped on for a minute before you end up joining, Kevin, because I thought I had an issue with my camera, but turns out it was actually a setting on StreamYard that was like mirroring my camera. So it looked weird. So I was restarting my computer, trying to figure it out. Anyway, I was texting Kevin maybe 45 minutes ago, an hour ago, about one of the articles he had written. And I was like, you know what? I talked to him when we had talked a little bit through the chat the other day. And I was like, you know what? We got to get Kevin on. So I figured I just have you join. We could just talk about whatever. But I want to ask you about this while we're talking about the whole Dana interview thing. As a fan of MMA, do you ever have like one of those, like, I know your goal when you interview Dana is to get some useful information for the fans, right, whether it be for, obviously the better the information, the better it is for your social media and your website. Is there ever like a question that you're like, I got to ask this question just for yourself to know? I'm curious.
Yeah, sometimes there is, and I'll tell you, like, one of the things I want to ask him is, like, I want to understand his freedom of speech stance on this Bryce Mitchell thing, right? Because I think Dana knows full well that freedom of speech does not have anything to do with private business. It has to do with the government preventing us from, saying what we want to say. So if you're in China, the government can, in fact, and does prevent you from speaking out and saying what they don't want you to say. That is not the case with the First Amendment in the United States. And I actually wrote a thing the other day on that. And I cited court cases where court cases specifically said, private employers have the right to fire somebody for what they say if it doesn't align with the employer's value. People misunderstand that all the time. I know Dana doesn't misunderstand that, right? But the average person on the street who's not a lawyer, who doesn't pay attention, who's not a constitutional scholar, they don't understand that. And so I don't understand Dana's stance on not cutting them, right? I think Dana's comments at Power Slap last week were sincere. I do believe that was his true feeling. And if it wasn't, like, somebody interviewed me the other day. Who was it that I did a Facebook Live Tuesday, and somebody asked me on the Facebook Live, they said, what do you think of Bryce Mitchell? And I said, he's a fucking idiot, right? And if you do not believe that, then, I'm sorry, but you don't deserve a seat at the table. And, Adolf Hitler is arguably the worst human to ever walk the face of the earth, and, indirectly responsible for 50 million deaths, maybe, directly responsible for tens of millions. And, you can't call him a good guy. How is the UFC keeping him on? So that is a question that I want to know. I think the fans would be interested in that question, but I'm kind of curious, knowing Dana as long as I do, how he is going to rationalize keeping that guy on the roster.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I've been trying to explain this to my audience, and there's people who, maybe are participants in my audience, maybe they're just MMA fans in general, who had popped in, because I feel like when you have an incident like what went on with Bryce Mitchell, I feel like the people who subscribe to those types of opinions, when they hear somebody criticize that opinion, they're like flies on shit. I mean, the second I drop a video, I'm like, Bryce is an idiot. He's a moron. They're like, no, Bryce is speaking facts. The new thing that people say all the time. I realized this in the last year. When you want to cover up like racism or anti-Muslim, anti-Jewish, whatever it may be, you can insert whatever word you want. What they do now is they're like, man, he's based, bro. He's based. That's kind of like the slang now. It's like a code word for what I've realized that over the last year. But what I've realized also is these people constantly say freedom of speech, brother, freedom of speech, brother. That's one of the famous lines Dana said at one point in time. So I quote it all the time. Freedom of speech. I'm getting frustrated just thinking about it, Kevin. How do these people not realize and let me just reiterate in case anybody in here right now doesn't realize what it is. Freedom of speech means you can't be arrested. You can't be punished by the government for things that you say. It doesn't mean that if you work for a company and you do things that brings bad publicity on them, like, for example, I'll say this right now. If Dana came out and said Bryce is a fucking idiot and I'm cutting Bryce. I don't want him to work for my organization anymore. That is literally freedom of speech of Dana and the UFC to get rid of Bryce.
Correct.
But for some reason, these people want to act like, oh, well, it's freedom. That doesn't mean you get to say everything you want at any time. Like, it's no different to simplify it for some people who maybe don't understand it because they've been warped by this online perception over the last few years. If you say ridiculous things and your girlfriend breaks up with you, or your wife divorces you, or your family disowns you, that has nothing to do with freedom of speech. If you're saying the N-word in my chat, and I'm not saying anybody is right now, and I blocked you, that's not freedom of speech. If Dana were to get rid of Bryce for saying that, that's Dana and the UFC's expression of freedom of speech.
Well, Joey, put this out there because this is important for them to know. Bryce exercised his right to freedom of speech because he said it, and the government, Trump did not send any border patrol agents to get him, or he wasn't thrown in jail. His podcast wasn't cut off in the middle. It wasn't taken off the website. He had his freedom of speech. Now, he said an offensive thing, a stupid thing, whatever you want to call it. It was right. It was horrendous what he said. And it just made him look, so bad. And I don't know if you saw his apology, right? But
fake.
There was a picture of him with text written on there. Obviously, that was written by his manager, a PR firm, or somebody, because I'm not going to say it was the most well-written apology ever, but it was in normal English.
It struck me as someone read it for him, but they tried to dumb it down to where it was almost believable that he read it, right?
But then you went on, you look below where his tweet part was, and I'm not, hey, look, I am bashing the guy, but I'm not trying to be personal against him. But when you read his words, like they were clearly, when he put the tweet out, he posted that apology, it looked like he was almost illiterate the way he wrote. And so it's like, his reading comprehension level was probably at a 3rd or 4th grade level. Right. And that's my freedom of speech. And so, like, when he says, I did my research. Yeah, well, I can only imagine where you researched and what you understood. But yeah, so that, to me, like, that is the question that I would like to hear from Dana. And, if he has a reason, that he's going to tell me why, okay, I will accept that. I cannot imagine what that reason would be. But that's something that I would like to know, right?
Yeah, I feel like just from my perception, the whole freedom of speech and, cancel culture kind of buzz topic, where maybe there was some people who got in trouble at their jobs or whatever it may be, whatever example you want to throw in, that maybe the majority felt like it was unjustified, where companies, took a certain stance on something and everyone's like, maybe that's a little bit too far. And I think people took that, and then now they took it to the extreme. But what I always notice, and this is last, we'll move on to something else more exciting after this. But I think I even said this to you when I saw your article about Bryce. I've always noticed time and time again, people only cite freedom of speech after they say something bigoted or, again, insert any one of those words. It's like it's never like, hey man, I really don't like Kevin Iole and I don't like his camera quality. And then you attack me and I'm like, freedom of speech, or someone trying to get me. It's right. It's always just like a cop out. You know what I'm saying?
100%. Well, here's the thing that I would say, right? I don't like the word cancel culture because I don't think that that's what people are doing. But there are certain things that I say, hey, I understand. Let's be more liberal on use of, right? In terms of, what you say. I want to give people a wide swath before I take action and say, okay, you can't do that. But if let's say I hire you to work for me and you're working for KevinIole.com, which becomes a 2-person business as opposed to a 1-person business, and you start saying things that I feel like are going to have people quit reading my website, quit following my YouTube channel, I'm going to say, you know what you are saying is detrimental to my business, and I hired you to boost my business. So I am canceling your employment with me because of what you said, because it is hurting the business, not helping the business. And to me, that's not a cancel culture. Now, if you go out there and you take a strong opinion and it's I disagree with it wholeheartedly, but it's a fair fact-based opinion, God bless you. I'll run that story every day, and I will fight like hell to defend your right to say what you said. And I think that's where the public, but we don't expect everyday people working 9-to-5 jobs to be constitutional scholars or lawyers and understand. I mean, I wish we had a better public education system, so our basic freedoms and the Bill of Rights that people did understand. But most people don't, and so it is what it is, I guess.
Yeah, I'll end the conversation on this, and we'll talk about 312 a little bit. If Bryce was rounded up by the police or the FBI or CIA and thrown in jail, I'd be the first outside the jail. I'd be the first making a video saying this is ridiculous, because at the end of the day, I do understand the reason freedom of speech is so important, which is also freedom of, the media, which is hilarious considering some of the, backstory with the UFC and different media members. But it's just, it's one of those things where I think people get too in the weeds about, like, basically you can say whatever you want with not being penalized by the potential company you work for.
Right.
But I did think it was a very interesting topic over the past week. And this is a good topic to move on to. It's kind of related. It seemed like Conor McGregor, you know how Conor over the last, 5
We're
or so
going to
many
Conor
years,
now.
Let's move to Conor. And I'll read some of the chat in a little bit, okay? Me and Kevin just starting off talking about some things. But it seemed like over the past 5 years, and I'm sure you've noticed this yourself, Kevin, you're smart. Anytime someone fights and gets a big win and is getting a lot of attention, it seems like Conor always tries to tweet something to steal their shine or take some of their shine. It seemed like he saw what Bryce said, and he's like, you know what? Let me attack Khabib's family. Let me use the N-word. Let me call a Muslim a carpet licker and try to steal some of that attention off of Bryce, which maybe Bryce appreciated. But what do you make of Conor right now with, like, it seems like, at some point he's got to be detrimental to the UFC. Like, do you think at any point, like, somehow the UFC is going to be like, okay, I mean, this is his 28th sexual assault. I mean, he's using racial slurs online. He's constantly drunk and cheating on his wife. Like, at what point are they like, you know what? Maybe we don't want to be in the Conor business anymore. But what do you think about all of it in totality?
Well, I started to think when I wrote my article on Conor the other day, I started to say to myself, and I didn't put this in the article, but it at least crossed my head. I wonder if this dude has the beginnings of CTE, right? We see this bizarre behavior that, that all these NFL players exhibited over years of, crashing helmets with each other and all that head trauma that they get from, Pop Warner, high school football, college football, and then the NFL. And it's really acute at the college football level and the NFL level, where they're huge and fast. And so, I started to wonder, I said, I wonder if Conor has CTE, and that would be incredibly sad if that is the case. But his behavior is so off the charts, right? And, some people attribute to drug use. I know there are fighters out there that are, he's coked up and he's this, and, they say that, this and the other thing, or that he's drinking and, all these different things. And, who knows? We are not there seeing what he is doing, but we see the results of his behavior. And there's something that is causing this behavior. Now, it just may be that he's a rich guy with nothing to do and all the money in the world, and so he's just out partying, drinking, and he's got enablers around him. I saw your video the other day where you talked about the security guards that were, surrounding him, and I mentioned that in my story. I said, hey, the entourage did nothing to, I mean, that was despicable what Conor did. Let's, forget that. And what do you expect? I know you, and I disagree with what you said. You said, I would hit him. I would have done this. You would have hit him, but you would have swung at him, but he's either going to deck you back and you're going to be out, right? Because as bad as he is, he hits us and we're out, right? We know that. Or the security guards are going to jump you and pound your head on the floor and knee you in the head. And you have no chance of landing a good shot. You have no chance of doing anything. And you're just going to get pummeled by these goons that are with him. So I don't know what it is, but I think, somebody really needs to get him some help, whether he needs, to be in rehab, maybe that's what it is. And if that is, God bless him. I hope he gets it, because, that is a sad addiction, right? And you hope that he gets, relief from that. And for his poor wife and his children, they don't need to put up with that. Imagine if this is how he acts in public, what do you think he's acting at home when he's drinking, right? Think about that. And so you feel badly for those. Isn't this his 5th or 6th kid that's coming up now? So
he has quite a few. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, his poor wife and these children that are living with that. And if it's head trauma, I know CTE is something that can't be diagnosed until death, and there's no cure for it, but there are other kinds. There might be some. Get him some help, at least figure out what's going on. And I hate what he's doing. It's despicable what he's doing, but it's also sad on a human level when you see it.
Yeah, I've always said when talking about Conor, and I've said this for the last couple of years, the 30 for 30 one day on ESPN is going to be a hell of a documentary, no matter which way this goes. But I'll ask you this, because this is something I've really thought about over the past couple of months when it comes to more of Conor's relationship with the UFC. I almost feel like, obviously, the UFC doesn't need Conor. Conor hasn't fought since 2021. Even before then, he wasn't super active. But for me personally, when I look at all the stuff that he does, the fact that I think, even if he was healthy, even he may be healthy right now, how can you trust him in a main event?
Right.
So my thought process is the UFC maybe necessarily doesn't want him or need him, but they don't necessarily want him going somewhere else, like headlining a BKFC card, which is it seems like that would be most likely and most logical. But I don't know, it just seems like that's the case. The UFC maybe doesn't even plan on having him fight anymore at his current state. They're hoping for some type of remedy, because I think really what it is, to answer your question from before, obviously it's all speculation, but I think he's surrounded by yes men because he has a bunch of money. So no, he doesn't have a friend around him that can stand up to him and say, dude, you're a fucking idiot. What are you doing? Because Conor is probably supplementing the income a lot of these people around him, whether they be friends or security guards, or, what's his wife who's taking care of 5 kids? Well, I guess she has help with the, all the money they have, but what is she supposed to stand up and say? Yeah, Conor, I really don't like that you're out while I'm 9 months pregnant, at the bare minimum, cheating on me in a hotel room, at the worst possible scenario, cheating on him, non-consensually. Like it doesn't seem to me there's somebody in his life that can break through to him. And even if there is, it's still going to be hard because he's clearly an egomaniac. But I'm just wondering in my head, and I'm just thinking out loud right here, I'm so curious, and I've covered Conor so much over the last 2-3 years myself, like just looking at all the different things going on. I'm curious where this story ends. Do you have any idea where you think the story ends?
Well, we've all seen in different sports athletes like Conor who, maybe weren't at the absolute top of their game, but were big stars. There's a guy you're never going to remember. I'm going to mention a basketball player years ago, Michael Ray Richardson, right? And Michael Ray Richardson must have been suspended 10 times for drug use, right? And all sorts of other things. And, Lamar Odom is another one, right?
I've heard him.
Had all that, stuff that was going on. And you think of these, these athletes, and it oftentimes ends very poorly, and they end up in really bad situations. I've seen how many fighters lose. Mike Tyson lost hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, God bless Mike, he came back and he's had sort of a second act, and he's made some money in his life and his career. And now after the Jake Paul fight, I think, he's kind of financially set. But we've seen it with a lot of these athletes over the years where, they just, they go into nothing. And, it is really, really sad. And the point is there's nobody that Conor respects enough to listen to. Obviously he doesn't respect Dee, because he wouldn't be Dee Devlin, his, either wife or fiance. I'm not sure if they're married yet. But, he doesn't respect Dee enough to control his behavior, even in her presence. As we saw the infamous video where she had to grab him when he was, going up to that other woman, and those type of things. And I just think he's going to be in for a major crash. And I hope, I don't care for him because he's, for his sake, but for Dee's sake and the children's sake, I hope he doesn't blow all that money so that at least they don't pay the price, right? He's going to pay the price. He may wind up in jail or who knows what else. Somebody may shoot him because of the crazy things he does, right? But I hope that they don't get penalized for his bad behavior. They're innocent bystanders in this, and I hope that they don't pay the price for his bad actions.
Yeah, I would hope at least he has some type of great financial advisor that has some money in an account that's continually earning interest, every
Right.
month. That kind of sets him up for, when he's potentially not raking in cash nonstop. But let's talk about UFC 312. Okay, let's talk about the main event, because it's really not, the card doesn't have a whole lot of substance. I understand that it's not, the most stacked card, but Dricus Du Plessis versus Sean Strickland 2. As you know, I think I've talked to you about this before. I'm super disappointed that it's not Du Plessis versus Khamzat Chimaev, but at least now that this fight is here, we're closer to Khamzat Chimaev potentially getting a title shot. How do you feel about this fight? And do you have a prediction for it? I'm assuming you do.
Yeah, I like Strickland. Du Plessis in the fight. I'm looking at the DraftKings numbers right now. -205 Du Plessis, plus 170 for Strickland, and I think that's a good number on the fight, right? I think Du Plessis is deservedly the favorite, and I mentioned this to him when I did my interview with him. The hardest thing in fighting is, once you win a championship, to defend it that first time, because you don't understand how hard guys are going after you. You know how hard you went after the title when you were the challenger, but it doesn't translate the same, right? So when you get that belt around your waist, and think about it from Dricus' standpoint, he wins the title by split decision over Strickland. Now he's fighting Adesanya, who lost in a kind of a shocking loss to Strickland. Everybody thought he would dominate Strickland. He loses it. He's had a couple losses at that point. So Adesanya is putting everything he has into coming out and being his absolute best. And Israel fought a great fight in that fight. He's winning the fight. It looks like, he's going to go ahead and reclaim the championship. And Dricus had the wherewithal to be able to come back and finish him with, one of the best submissions of the year. I think that makes you better. I think mentally, now there's nothing that I can't do, that I can handle all situations. So I think the line is fair, him being about a 2-1 favorite. I like Dricus, and I think that, he is going to be more aggressive against Strickland. And I think that you'll see him do some different things than he did in the first fight. He used the phrase to me, marauding. He's going to be more of a marauder. I think there's a chance he gets to finish. Strickland is a tough guy to finish, so I will predict it goes to a decision. But I think you're going to see maybe a 49-46, something like that, in favor of Dricus Du Plessis.
Yeah, I agree with you. I tend to agree with you. I think Dricus may get the finish, because I think Strickland, we've heard so many people talk about it, how he's like tricky the first time you fight him, and he's hard to hit because he's super defensively responsible. But having that first fight out of the way, then he went and fought Adesanya, got some more experience there, had a very tough fight there. It was back and forth, and getting the finish there. Now he knows Strickland's style, and at the end of the day, it's not like Strickland has power to put him away. It's going to be impossible for anyone to finish Dricus, it seems, let alone Sean Strickland, who's essentially a split decision machine. So now Dricus kind of having him figured out. He's going to move forward. He's not going to be worried about what's coming back. He has the grappling advantage, which I don't know how much you remember the first fight, but he was able to take him down pretty easy a couple times, but he never
couldn't do anything with him when he got him down.
I felt like he wasn't, like, watching that back. I watched that back last week. I felt like he wasn't prioritizing the control time. Like, you remember when Jan was taking down O'Malley? Like, I know that fight was forever ago, but it was like he was more focused on hitting the shots as O'Malley tried to get up against the fence. I felt like that's what Dricus was kind of doing. And I feel like even if it started to go bad, Dricus could mix in the grappling and make a round kind of boring, kind of prioritize a little bit more control time, maybe get a little bit of ground and pound, and win rounds that way if he needs to. And I also think, it takes one big shot from Dricus. We know how big, we know how much power he has. Yep. And even if somehow he ends up down, man, he just seems like, I always say, he fumbles his way to victory. It's like, if you look back at all his fights, he didn't look great against Brad Tavares. Obviously he won. He looked good against Adesanya, but in that fourth round, right before the finish, I thought it was a lock Adesanya was going to win. I don't know what, if you can look back on the live odds or what it was, but at that point in time, I would have said, 75% chance Adesanya has this in the bag. And he somehow goes out there and pulls out that submission win over Adesanya. Now he's fighting Sean again. He knows there's not that power coming back. So I could see Dricus, just because he figured him out a little bit more, maybe getting the finish. I think I picked him via 3rd round TKO on the ground because I think he will mix in that grappling more. But we'll have to see, man. I also think, and, I usually I'm not one of these people who's always bringing like emotional mindsets of I'm not one of these dudes who's like, oh yeah, this guy's this guy's that. I really do think Dricus kind of messed with Sean's brain a little bit. Like I noticed that right before the first fight. And I swear I was picking Strickland. And then once I seen the way Strickland was acting, he got emotional at the press conference. He's crying on Theo Von's podcast. The way he, acted in the lead up to the fight, like the week before, I said, you know what? I got to switch to Dricus because it seems like Sean is kind of mentally broken by Dricus. And even if you look at the lead up, Sean's always talking trash. He's talking about Khamzat over the last couple of days, barely saying anything about Dricus. The only thing he said was calling him basically mentally disabled in the way he fights, but in a way that's like a backhanded compliment.
That he's
I haven't
crazy.
heard him say anything. Strickland's always trying to talk crap about someone, but he's not even willing to say anything bad about Dricus. So I'm like, you know what? I'm picking Dricus. Plus, Dricus is one of the smartest fighters. If there's anyone that can make those adjustments and go out there and, have more success than he had the first time. And I think what won him the fight the first time was how much he moved forward. It was a very close fight. In some of those close rounds, when you're like, I don't know who won, it was Dricus moving forward. By the way,
power escorted the fights, right? And Dricus was landing the harder shots.
Yep. Real quick, Derek, thank you for the $10. If you guys have any questions, throw them in the chat right now, and in a few minutes, I'll speed run through some questions if you guys want to ask some questions for me and Kevin. But yeah, you go ahead, Kevin. What were you gonna say?
The one concern that I would have if I'm betting Dricus and laying 2-1. Did you see the video that he did with Michael Bisping yesterday? So
I did not see that. I've heard about it, but I did not see it.
Michael Bisping said at the beginning of the video, I weigh 225 pounds, and he looks small next to Dricus, right? And now Dricus has always been big, right? I remember him in his early UFC fights. The first time I shook hands with him, he's got a massive hand. He is a big middleweight. He's a guy that could be fighting at light heavyweight without much of an issue, right? You talk about Alex Pereira moving up to light heavyweight and doing it. I think Dricus could go up and do that as well. So cutting the weight that he may have to cut because he looks even bigger this time. And if if in fact he's bigger than Bisping, I'm sure Bisping at 225 has a little bit of a belly roll over the middle that Dricus does not have. But I tell you what, if he's anywhere around that weight, you're talking about a 30, 40 pound weight cut. That is tough. And that the one thing we know about Strickland is that he is going to have cardio and be able to go. And in the 5th round, he's going to be good. I don't want to call him Merab-like because that would be an exaggeration, but on a low level, he's kind of like Merab-like, right? You know that you're not going to tire Strickland out. So forget about that game plan to try to wear him out. So that would be, if I looked and I'm looking for one thing that I would say, hey, would point me in Sean's direction, that would be it.
Well, let me tell you one kind of my hot takes when it comes to Sean Strickland. And I know you're not necessarily going to agree with this right now, but maybe it'll be something that's in your head when you're watching the fight this Saturday. I don't think Sean Strickland's cardio is that good. I think it's the low output. If he, he's been talking in the lead up to this fight. I know it's always, we're going to go to war, we're death, all this and that. But I believe if he really does, like maybe he thinks, okay, my style last time ended up having me lose a close split decision. Let me get a little bit more active. If he starts getting into a legitimate brawl with Dricus, I can actually see Sean Strickland's. I'm not saying he's going to gas out and fall over, but if he ups that output, I could see him actually having some issues later in the fight, 4th and 5th round. If I'm not mistaken, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong on this. I think I might have scored the 5th round for Dricus in the first fight, which was insane. If that is true, I think so. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's the low output of Sean. So if he thinks in his head, okay, I can't pitter patter this fight, let me be a little bit more active because Dricus is trying to march me down and beat me up, I could see that ending up being an issue.
Where I would think it would be an issue for Sean is if Dricus grapples a lot, right? If you have to carry that guy's weight, right? What is he going to rehydrate up to, right? On by the time they fight on Sunday morning in Australia time, my guess is that he is going to be probably 210 at least, right? Maybe 215. and Strickland having to carry that weight might be the one thing if they grapple a lot, and he's got to pull him off his back and that type of thing. I think if it's a stand-up fight, no matter what Dricus does, I think Sean will be okay cardio wise. But I think if he gets him, gets him to the ground like you alluded to before, Joey, and goes there, then I think that's where the cardio may become an issue.
Also, I don't know if you watched the press conference last night. I didn't pay super close attention to it. But I did see when they stared down at the end, I know every fight card, everyone's saying Staph. 100%, because when they did the stare down, it was on the left arm of Strickland. So we got a close-up, high-definition shot. It's not a matter of if it is Staph. It's almost definitely Staph. It's a matter of how long has he kind of recovered from it? When's the last time he took antibiotics? Which could also negatively affect Sean Strickland. Like basically on that close-up, right. I would say I'm 99% sure that it was staph infection.
It's interesting because, the staph is very, very, very contagious. And depending on where it is, they won't let him fight. Now, it's going to be really hard, right, to convince the doctors to pull him out. But
could you imagine what that card would look like?
Oh, my God, right? What do you do? So to
better
me,
call Khamzat quick.
That's going to be a major, major problem. So I have to think the UFC doctors already know that he's okay.
Yeah, I would assume as well. Yeah.
And so to me, Dr. Jeff Davison is the UFC doctor you see a lot of times in the ring. And I know Jeff is from Las Vegas, and I've known him long before he worked for the UFC. He's the head of the trauma unit at Valley Hospital here in Las Vegas. And Jeff is really good, and he gets there on Monday. So when the fighters arrive, he's talking to them. I'm sure, he saw Strickland in Las Vegas before he came here. So my guess is that they are fairly confident that it's contained, it's not an issue, and that because this is not controlled. When they were in Saudi Arabia, the commission, the UFC was basically the commission. Australia has an MMA commission, and they are in control of those kind of things. And nothing the UFC is going to say, is going to stop them if they decide that, hey, Strickland has staph and it's contagious. So I think in fact that, Dr. Davidson has already looked at that, has relayed that on to the authorities in Australia, and that when they get checked, they have a final check at the weigh-in before the weigh-ins, before they go out in the morning. So, it's already been done. Or I guess it's the weigh-in starting now, right? We're around the time where the weigh-in, it'll be that'll be taken care of.
Yeah, because I couldn't imagine if they pulled Sean from. Could you imagine what 312 would look like? It would be. I don't know what they would do. I guess Khamzat's in Australia. They'd have to. Could you imagine that getting thrown together on 2 days' notice? Like UFC.
I don't think they could do that. I've been trying to get. Khamzat's manager told me. I mentioned this the other day. I was supposed to be interviewing Khamzat this week, or hoping to interview him this week, and his manager told me that it probably would happen. And then now he's kind of gone radio silent on me. So I could play conspiracy theorist and say, well, maybe they flew him into Australia and he's secretly there. But I don't want to start any rumors.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. I'm going to read this real quick. From Pat, Poverty Pat. He said, I normally donate 99 cents, but a special moment deserves an especially large donation. Poverty Pat approves of this stream. Kevin, what are your thoughts of GFL? Doomed from the start. Kevin, go ahead.
Congratulations, Joey, and thank you, Pat, for that. But yes, I agree with you. Doomed from the start. They're making all the wrong moves. And I don't think they understand that people don't want to see these old fighters fight again, right? Do you really want to see Holly Holm fight again after her last couple of UFC fights, right?
I don't want to
start thinking about it. And so, they're trying to tread on the fact that these people were once popular in the UFC. And not all of them were that popular, right? Some of them were successful, but they weren't necessarily popular. I don't understand what they are doing. Why they think this is going to work. I'm happy for the fighters, the Chris Weidmans of the world, the Luke Rockholds of the world. They're going to get a couple extra bucks, right? Hey, they've sacrificed a lot in their lives. So, if they take some money, but the GFL the concept is stupid. It's never worked. And nobody wants to see 40-year-olds fight. So I think it has zero chance.
Zero chance. I'm wondering, here's what I've said, and I haven't researched it at all. I know nothing but what I've seen on like surface level social media. And I've told everyone I'd be surprised if there was one event. And if there's one event, I don't know if there's going to be any more events, because I've seen like rumors of different contracts. Again, I don't know the legitimacies of those contract rumors, but signing that roster that they have signed, the fact that like a lot of people have come out and said they're happy with what they've signed for, then you have kind of the weird fly-by-night company aspect of them announcing fighters that they've signed that have come out and said, have you seen, there's been, I don't remember who it was, but there's been a couple guys who've come out and be like, what? I didn't sign with these guys. It just seems like one of those like, oh, let's get this together. It's going to be a great idea. And then maybe, wasn't there an MMA company years ago that had like a couple events and then died off? What was that? Do you remember?
Affliction
was it? Yeah, because I wasn't a fan around that. I just remember
Donald Trump was involved in that. I interviewed Donald Trump. And who was Donald Trump? Who was speaking for Donald Trump then? Michael Cohen.
Oh, okay. So that's, yeah, I remember hearing of that. Like that was around for like a couple events. I don't know what the general consensus was around it at the time, but I feel like that's what GFL is going to be. And you know what's weird? I thought it was really weird Chris Weidman like retiring on air.
Unretired.
And then all of a sudden he's like signing with GFL. I don't know. The whole thing just seems very, very.
I was mad at him. You know, I wrote a retirement column. So he screwed Dominick Cruz because I did not write a Dominick Cruz retirement column today based on Chris Weidman coming out of retirement.
Yeah. You saw that he retired today. Dominick Cruz did, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's what you're talking about. Okay, I want to make sure. All right, let's see what this says. Kevin, how does it feel challenging Dana on some of the decisions he's made? 99% of MMA journalists just bend the knee to him.
I love the emoji there. So, you know, I just feel like I'm asking the question that needs to be asked, right? I mean, I don't think I'm doing anything Woodward and Bernstein here, right? I think I'm just asking a pretty obvious question. Like, if I get the interview with Dana tonight, I would be negligent in my duties if I didn't say, hey, what about this Bryce Mitchell thing, right? So I'm not sure, like everybody, I get all this patting on the back for asking certain questions. And, you know, I think like when I'll just tell this little story, Joey. You know, when the whole Jon Jones thing came down, that's when a lot of this started. Like when Dana was going on for months about Jon being pound for pound, and then that night after the Contender Series, and I said to him, "Does he have pictures of you?" And that was, you know, I was sitting right in front of him. So like at those Apex shows, I'm usually in this front row center, and, you know, I'm the closest at the arena, the numbered pay-per-views. Usually I'm off further away. I'm off on the side because they let the cameras all get in the middle. So I'm usually on the end of the aisle. So that's like in their bigger room. So I'm the furthest away from him. So like I've known Dana a long time. I'm comfortable talking to him. And I said that more like I would say in private talking to him than I normally would say in a public reporter asking us, you know, like I forgot where I was at the moment that I said it. I just blurted it out because it was like, I'm going like, how could you possibly be saying this? Right. And that, you know, and that was the thing. But I just kind of feel like, hey, ask the question that you need to ask. And as long as you can back up, you know, your question with, you know, facts. Like you remember, Joey, what was it? UFC 310. I asked him about Conor McGregor and he shut the question down. And, you know, I think most people would not. So if I get any credit, and I'm not saying that I should, but if I get any credit, it wasn't for asking him about Conor McGregor. It's when he said, if I had a comment on Conor McGregor, I would have made it. I said, and then he said, he hasn't fought with us for 4 or 5 years. And I said, yeah, but you've had him on a show, UFC 303, and you've been saying he may fight, you know, coming up in the next couple of months. So following up. And so just knowing your facts and being able to quickly, because I know a lot of the people who are in the chat and a lot of the fans, they've never been in our situation. And you get, you know, like if it's me or John Morgan, the people who've been around a while, they give us more, you know, leeway. We get to ask more than one question. But most of the other reporters that are there are, you know, ESPN reporters, of course, do. When Mark Ray Monday was there, he did. But, you know, there's a small number that can ask multiple questions. The rest of them get their one question and then they move on. And, you know, there's a lot going on. There's a lot happening. And sometimes you don't phrase the question the way you want, or you don't think of it exactly the right way. And then you lost your opportunity and everybody's, oh, you're stupid. They're not stupid. You know, I mean, there's some people that are, but, you know, most of them are not. And, you know, it's just a difficult thing to do. I have done this for a long time. And so I'm comfortable, you know, asking, and I go into the press conferences, I'm watching the fights, I'm kind of thinking, okay, what do I want to ask him about? What do I want to think about? And I'm trying to remember things from the event, and I'm trying to think, what is my column going to be post-fight? What is my video going to be post-fight? So that I can then ask questions, you know, to support what I want to write.
Yeah, I think, you know, I told a story recently on stream about how when I was younger, maybe probably 12 years old or something, I was at a playground. And there was like 2 playgrounds nearby, and some guy lost his cell phone. This was, you know, I was like 12 years old. So this was like when there was like the little like singular phones. And me and a couple of my friends went over and returned it to the guy, and the guy tried to give us $20. And I said, oh, no, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. He's like, oh, thank you so much. Blah, blah, blah. Thank you so much. And I told him, no, I don't want your $20. And the point I'm getting to here is, I think sometimes the precedent of, you know, whether it be the MMA media or the world in general, like a lot of people, like, for example, you pushing back should be the normal. You know, you just having your facts, you're not necessarily being disrespectful. It should be the normal. It should be the normality of the MMA media, where because it seems like it doesn't exist for a multitude of reasons, whether it's, you know, lack of knowledge on a topic, or you're stressed out because you're thinking of on your feed, or whatever the reasons may be. But you have that ability because you've known him for so long. You've been in that situation for so long. You've been a journalist for so long. You have the knowledge. You can push back. I feel like it's one of those things where it should be normal. Like returning that cell phone should be normal. You pushing back should be normal. But because it's not, you seem like the outlier. Even though I've been saying, oh, thank God for Kevin Iole. He's been pushing back and doing it in the right way where we can get some information. And it seems like we're actually getting info. That's at the end of the day, that's really what we want. It's not like we want to see you going after Dane. Like, I mean, it's
of course just a fight, yeah.
But it's not like you're trying to go out of your way to disrespect him. You're pushing back in a way. Maybe somebody else, some Johnny come lately, he might look at it as disrespect. You know what I mean? If someone really started pressing him about the Jones stuff the way you did, maybe if it's some Johnny come lately, he might think that is disrespectful. But for you, you're able to do it because you've been around so long.
Well, let me throw this out there, Joey, because I think it's an interesting comparison. Like, I remember Canelo fought Amir Khan, and that was a boxing match. That was like T-Mobile had just opened, so 2016, 2017. And the fight that should have happened was Gennady Golovkin. And De La Hoya was promoting Canelo at the time. And he was just dodging Golovkin, right? They kept fighting different people and not Golovkin. And I knew Canelo wasn't afraid, right? Canelo, especially at that time, when he would fight anybody. So to me, that was Oscar strategically not wanting that fight. So I was really pounding Oscar at the post-fight press conference, but you know, asking him, why is this not happening? He got mad, right? But I came up in an era when there was a lot of reporters from newspapers, big newspapers, you know, the New York Times, the New York Daily News, you know, the Chicago Tribune, the LA Times, and a lot of these cities had 2 newspapers, and the boxing writers had all been on the beat for a long time. So they all asked those kind of questions. Now, when you turn around and you look at the MMA, and we were talking about a picture that you showed me today of the MMA media at a fight card that you were at, a lot of them are really young. When I say young, 30 and, you know, 35 and under, and don't have a lot of experience in covering. And they haven't had mentors just to sit there and watch and see how it's done. Now, you should have learned that in journalism school, but a lot of MMA reporters did not go to journalism school, right? And so, you know, they're into MMA coverage because they loved MMA. And I think a lot of people that cover MMA do a really good job. You know, I'm surprised at the quality, considering the lack of journalism education among a lot of them. But I think, you know, that there hasn't been a lot of the veterans MMA writers that there will be for the next generation. You know, that when I'm gone and the people that are below me are now my age, or maybe not quite as old as me, but they're at that age, they are going to set the tone for the ones that come behind. And I think that'll change things.
Yeah, let me throw this in there as well. If you're able, when you ask about the Bryce situation, if you're able to kind of work in the Conor McGregor Habib comments recently, if you can work that into the interview, I would love to hear an answer on that. I don't know how much of an answer you're actually going to get on
You're
that.
You're not going to get much of an answer. So that's one of the,
yeah.
But I'll ask that, you know, I mean, we'll see.
Ham says, Kevin, you are a legend. Please accept your virtual flower. Shout out to Ham for the $5 super chat. By the way, I haven't done it yet because I put it as a special guest on the thing. I'll link Kevin's channel down in the description for you guys to check out if you want to. Let's see what else we got here. Okay, this is something. Any indication that the UFC has access to fighters' medical diagnosis from the Performance Institute? This information influenced matchmaking decisions. Example, Ngannou's knee issues before the Gane fight.
Yes, of course they.
Yeah, I would assume they have information on their medical diagnosis. And that's,
well, San Diego, number one, the Performance Institute is owned by the UFC, and there are UFC employees that are examining the fighters. So yes, they do. And they have access to the fighters' medical records because they have to see those to make sure that they're fit to fight. And the UFC has a whole medical staff. You know, Dr. Jeff Davidson is the head of their medical team, but they have a lot of people. So yes, they do. And you know, they have to take when they make their fight. So he asked. I'm trying to say how to explain this. I want to say it the right way. So if you say you're healthy enough to fight, and they get a medical clearance, you know, without a really extensive examination pre-fight, they'll make the fight. But if they have concern like, hey, can Francis Ngannou fight? They're gonna send him for an exam, send him to a specialist, and take a look at him. Because you know, maybe I took the question wrong, Joey. It was almost like he was being accusatory, like they were using the information for some ne'er-do-well purpose. They don't want, like, in other words, we didn't know Francis wasn't going to come back, and they didn't know for sure Francis wasn't going to come back. You know, he was their heavyweight champion. They would rather Francis be healthy and fighting and miss one fight than to miss 3 years, right? You know, by his knee get totally torn up or maybe never a fight again. So they're going to make the medical decisions that that are right for the fighter. Now, what's right for fighters is different than what's right for lay people, right? Some of us would never fight, or never compete in anything with a little tick cut on our finger. We'd be kind of like baseball players, right? They're more like hockey players.
Yeah, or you might have a broken pinky toe. You might not want to step in there either.
Yes, correct.
Well, let me ask you this. This is a perfect segue to the Arman Islam situation. So Arman pulled out of the fight. It was a back injury. It was around the time he was cutting weight. Dana seemed not very happy with Arman.
Yes.
What do you think that really stems from? Do you think it is Arman potentially concealing that injury leading up to the time that he pulled out, hours beforehand? Do you think Dana, because what I took it as, here's what I kind of took it as from hearing Dana's comments. Maybe this is completely wrong. It's not like I've said this as fact or anything, but I definitely took it as Dana was annoyed. But maybe it was the fact that maybe the medical doctors checked him out and they said, it's up to the fighter. We can clear him because maybe it's this muscle injury. That's not a broken bone. It's not this. And then Arman said, I don't think I can go. And then it's like, oh, you now screwed up my event 24 hours out. Maybe he knew about the injury already. What was your take on that whole situation?
I agree. I agree with you. I mean, I think what happened was Arman admitted that he got hurt riding the air cycle while he was cutting weight. So there was no injury up until that point. The BS about Nina drama and hurting him and all that. And there was nothing.
Everyone runs with the dumbest narratives nowadays.
Right. He got hurt. And it's kind of weird, but riding the air cycle, trying to cut weight, and it injured his back. The UFC doctors examined him, and I am 100% certain that the doctor called Dana and said, we looked at him. He's good to go. We will clear him if he wants to fight. It's up to the fighter to decide what he wants to do. Now that's a tough spot for Arman to be in. He's fighting the #1 fighter in the world. It's going to be his only chance at the championship because, he is not a popular fighter, right? They're not going to give him multiple shots at it. So he knows, can I beat Islam Makhachev with my back the way it is? And I think what Arman said was, no, I can't beat him with my back. I might be able to beat Charles Oliveira with my back like this, or Mike Chandler with my back like this, but I'm not going to be able to beat Islam Makhachev. And so as a result, he pulled out of the fight, and Dana was really upset. I was surprised because I thought, that they would announce, okay, Arman is going to get the next fight. But I think when the way it played out, that told me that, in fact, the doctors cleared him, and Dana was upset because he was cleared to be able to fight.
Yeah, that's exactly what I took away from the post-fight press conference as well, that it felt like Arman, maybe could have went. But in Arman's defense, I know some people may have never had this problem before. I got a pinched nerve in my neck. And one time, I told this story before, I think on stream, one time I was carrying a bag of trash out of my house, and I was holding it by the little, drawstrings or whatever on the trash bag. And the string broke. It wasn't even a particularly heavy bag, but I don't know, maybe when I pulled it out, something was wrong with it. And it just threw me off balance, like just ripped out of my hand, just threw me off balance. And that nerve, something happened to that nerve in my neck. And it threw me out of whack for like a couple days. I was going somewhere. By the time I got where I was going, like 30 minutes away, I could barely walk. It was horrible. It went away, luckily, a couple days later.
Right.
But stuff like that, weird stuff like that can happen all the time. People don't realize that. They're saying, oh, Arman's spitting on his head with Nina drama. Of course, even though that's a wrong, like I thought that was kind of a false narrative from the jump. But even if that is false, which it is, a lot of people, people are going to run with that forever, right, Kevin? That's going to be like the talk of Arman's injuries for the next, couple years. But let me ask you this. Dana's been teasing Islam's going to fight somebody. He's kind of giving out these little hints here and there. I have racked my brain. I've looked at all potential options. I know there's been those fake Twitter accounts posting basically fake news for clout. They throw shit at the wall. They pray that it sticks. That's the way I describe those fake Twitter accounts. But to me, it seems like the writing is on the wall. They have to be trying to make Islam versus Topuria. There's really no other option. What is your take on that?
Well, I think, Topuria is going to fight Volkanovski in April. And then I think, there's going to be a conversation with both guys. I think Topuria would love that fight. That is a fight that, that he would take it in April if he could get it. We know that Islam is not going to fight in April because of Ramadan. So he won't be able to train. So there will be no chance of him, doing that. So as a result of that, I believe that, that might be the next fight for Islam, right? There's no other fight that makes sense. There's nobody like, it's not Patricio Pitbull, right? That they're going to sign and bring in and say, oh, this is the big fight that, he's moving up to fight Islam. So that is my guess, is that, it's Topuria that later in the year, like assuming he gets past him. Who else would it be? It can't be, we know it's not Conor. I don't think it's Max. It's definitely not Gaethje, right? So you start going down about all the people, like who is it there? It's not Beneil Dariush. It's, Moicano just fought. Like, who is it?
Yeah, I think it has to be Topuria. But do you think for sure Topuria Volk 2 happens? Because I was wondering if here's what I thought maybe they might make. I could see him doing like Volk Diego Lopez for a title, for maybe an interim title, just so Topuria would have the opportunity to become a double champion. Because at the end of the day, if they make Volk versus Lopez, and again, this is pure speculation, this is not, anything that's for sure, they would make it for the interim belt just so Topuria, if he did beat Islam, he would have that opportunity to be simultaneous double champ. And then if he lost, he could come down and fight the interim champ. If he wins, they can then strip him of that belt and make the winner of Volk versus Lopez the undisputed champion. What do you think of that potential possibility?
I certainly think there's something to that. I wouldn't dismiss that out of hand, but I think that, Dana was not after the Holloway fight. He was not too, there's a lot of guys, blah, blah, blah. He was not all that hot on Ilya moving up. Now, if Ilya tells them I have trouble making the weight, I don't think that I can make the weight, then I think that's a different story. But I think, Ilya, he's a young guy, but he's very professional. And I think they know if, Ilya can make the weight. So as a result, I think he's going to fight Volk. And, Islam even said he probably isn't going to fight till the fall, right? So wouldn't this be a great September fight, assuming Ilya wins over Volk, that you now all of a sudden have, Ilya with a couple title defenses under his hand, 2 wins over Volk and a win over Max Holloway, as in that title fight. That's a pretty good resume to go up against Makhachev at that point.
Yeah, I agree. I hope that I don't know. I'm kind of mixed. I love the fight, but as I've been a bit of a defender of Islam. I hate that I know afterwards if he beats Topuria that it'll be, he beat another, he beat another featherweight. I know that's essentially what it would be. All right, let me ask you this, Kevin. Joey, please ask Kevin to ask Dana on why Chimaev wasn't next. Well, we kind of already know that, and also we already talked about the Makhachev news. So why do you think Chimaev wasn't next, Kevin?
I think he had a personal issue that he wasn't able to compete, and so they went to the next best contender. Dana, when he watched the Whitaker fight, was blown away by it. I think he wanted the fight. There was a personal issue with Khamzat that precluded him from fighting now, going through a training camp now. I don't, to be honest with you, I don't even know right now, is it cleared up? I'm thinking and hoping it is, but I don't know for sure. And then, so that's why I think that they did what they did. And then that way, by doing that got them clear for, they gave Strickland the rematch that they promised him, and Khamzat can come to the US and fight maybe on International Fight Week. And so a lot of big things come out of that.
And in a way, the UFC doesn't really lose a big fight, because whether it's DDP or it's Strickland for Khamzat next, I think Khamzat is a mega fight for anyone. Let me ask you this, Kevin, because we didn't talk about it beforehand. Are you okay for like another 15, 20 minutes?
Okay, as long as you need.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Until I'm keeping checking my text here, so when I see Dana pop up, then I'll
if you have to go, if you randomly have to go do the Dana interview, just let me know. Let me read a couple more of these messages. By the way, thank you, C4 San Diego. I don't know if I thanked you for the $10. Aaron, let's read Aaron's messages. How does Kevin feel about covering a sport, MMA, UFC, which is less dysfunctional than boxing? Does he enjoy one over the other?
It's an interesting thing. When I first started covering MMA, I thought it was bad boxing. Like, I didn't know grappling at all. And when I watched it, I'm like, oh my God, this is like bad boxing. Rah, rah, rah. And so I really, got to like boxing more than I like MMA. As we sit here now, and I've learned MMA and I understand the sport, I think I love them both. I cover more MMA than I do boxing these days, because there's more interest in MMA. There's more big events in MMA, and the matchmaking is more fair in MMA. But on a given night, if you said to me, Kevin, which fight would you rather cover, this UFC fight or this boxing match that are going on, my answer would change depending on what the main event was on a given night. Is there a fight on one of those two cards that really jazzes me up, right? When Canelo fought Golovkin, I couldn't wait to see that fight for years. So there was hardly going to be any MMA fight that could have made me want to go to it over Canelo Golovkin. But then, UFC 300, there was no boxing match that I could have said, hey, I want to go anywhere. UFC 299, same way, right? So my answer, and I know it sounds like a cop-out, but it is really true. And if you look at my actions, what I've done over the years, when there have been those kind of things, you'll see I've done both, right? So it just kind of depends on sort of which event that I think is a better event and that I'm more personally jazzed up to see. I'm not always right. Sometimes I go to one event and the other event was better, but
to the other.
It's kind of like what my anticipation level is.
Yeah, I think it's crazy because I know I asked you this before, but how long have you been covering combat sports in general?
When I was in college in 1979, I would have been a sophomore in college. I was I started covering boxing. I got a full-time job while I was still in college at this Gannett newspaper, small Gannett newspaper in suburban Pittsburgh. And they used to have Friday night fights once a month at a local Howard Johnson's. And I used to go to those Howard Johnson's and cover. And then my first major fight was 1981. I covered a Larry Holmes heavyweight title fight. So, if you want to count my little small cards, 1979, if we're going to say, hey, it's got to be a big card, that would be 1981 with Larry Holmes and Ronaldo Snipes.
So you're coming up on damn near 50 years covering combat sports. Let me ask you this. So I started my channel in 2021. So I don't know if we've never really talked about this, but when I started my channel back in 2021, I had wanted to start a channel since about 2013, 2014. And essentially kind of the synopsis of it was I kind of hated the media coverage. I thought there was a lot of dumb narratives in the MMA community. And I just felt like a lot of the time I would participate in the sport and watch the sport, whether it be the fights, the media coverage, and it would like drive me nuts that there were certain things that weren't said, or, certain narratives would run rampant. And over the years, it's gotten worse and worse and worse. But now that I've been doing it, covering it, and when I first started, basically I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about editing. I didn't know anything about recording anything. I just said to myself, I'm just going to try to put out, as much content as I can when I first started, just to try to learn. It's not even about viewership. It's not about anything like that. It was just, let me get better with each and every video. The point I'm getting to is after 4 years, sometimes when there's like a crappy Apex card or there's the dumbest stuff going on, the narratives in MMA, sometimes I'm like, man, I don't know if this sport's for me, like almost sarcastically, but also, in my mind, sometimes maybe I'm not going to talk about this for, a week or whatever. After doing it for, almost 45 years, was there ever a time in that 45 years you ever thought about pivoting to maybe a different genre of media or a different career altogether? I'm curious.
Yeah, when I did, especially when I was at a newspaper. So I was at Yahoo from 2007 through end of 2023. So just about 17 years. I just was short of my 17th anniversary at Yahoo. Before that, I was at newspapers, and I was at the Las Vegas Review-Journal for like 17 years. And I covered fights there. But I also covered golf. Like I covered Tiger Woods' first win. I saw Tiger's mother die the other day. I stood outside the clubhouse and interviewed Tita Woods after Tiger won his first professional event. I think I was the only reporter in Las Vegas that actually interviewed her then. So I did cover other sports. I covered the XFL. When Vince McMahon brought it in the first time. So I covered different things along the way, but I always had boxing, and then starting in 2000, always had MMA as well. So those were always my two primary things.
Okay. That's just crazy. 45 years of covering that stuff. C-Ray TV, thank you for the $4.99. If Kevin Ali and Jon Jones walk into a room, Kevin walks out every single time. You're the GOAT.
I'm going to tell you the story. This was funny. When Jon Jones first came into the UFC, he used to call me all the time. And like, I went to Minnesota for UFC 87. And that card, Brock Lesnar was on that card. GSP John Fitch was the main event. There was a lot of big names on that card. And Jon Jones was buried on the undercard. And I did a story on Jones because even though I didn't think his performance was that great, you just looked, that was one of the few times you looked at that raw talent and you went, oh my God, this guy is going to be amazing. And I interviewed him and did a story after that show. So he used to call me a lot and say, hey, I want you to interview me. One day he was in Las Vegas and he said, hey, I am at the mall. Would you please come and interview me? And I said, well, what mall? There's like 4 malls in Las Vegas. What mall are you at? So he told me, Fashion Show Mall in Las Vegas. So we went to the food court and we got Orange Julius of all things. And we were sitting there and he told me, I want to fight Anderson Silva. So this was before UFC 94. So I think he fought Stephan Bonnar at UFC 94, I believe it was, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe that was UFC 100, one or the other. But it was a Stephan Bonnar fight. So maybe it was UFC 100. I can't remember which one it was.
I'll tell you right now. I'll look it up.
Okay.
So he fought Stephan Bonnar on UFC 94. You were right initially. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
So he said, yeah, he said, I want to fight Stephan Bonner, or he was fighting Stephan Bonner. I want to fight Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva is my idol, I think. So I'm taking notes like crazy. And then he says to me, I have so much respect for Anderson Silva. Please don't ever write that. And like, I said to him, John, you said it, on the record, but I didn't write it. And then years later, he brought it up and talked about it. But in 2009, I would have had that story, which would have been big news at the time, that John wanted to challenge Anderson Silva.
Yeah, that would have been huge news. I just started to come into the sport around that, like a little bit after that time, because I was kind of like casually paying attention around like UFC 100. I actually got invited over a friend's house to watch UFC 100, and I said no. I didn't go. I didn't even go watch.
Oh, dude,
that's how because I was young at that point in time. That's how casual I was.
We had a bet with Dana then if they. What is this? We had a bet that night with Dana that he would base jump off the top of Mandalay Bay if they did $1 million on the pay-per-view.
Yeah. Did they do $1 million? Did he ever?
They did do $1 million, and he refused to jump off the top. He said, "Oh, the company won't let me do it." Blah 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 blah.
That's pretty funny. All right, this Devin says, "What was the Jon Jones news?"
Do you want to say it, or do you want me to say it?
It was some type of sponsorship news. I don't even remember what the sponsorship was. Man, I'm getting tired of. I know why they do it, but I mean, I'm getting tired of fighters teasing big news, and I know every time, so I don't get blue balled by it. I think I texted you yesterday, and I said either Jon Jones vacating or it's just a sponsorship, and I think you texted me back. It's got to be a sponsorship,
yeah.
And it's just like, I mean, talk about I know he was thinking, I'm gonna get everyone riled up, thinking it's the Aspinall. Yeah. Let me ask you that while we're on the topic of Jon Jones. Do you think the Jon Jones-Tom Aspinall fight comes to fruition? Gun to your head right now.
Yes.
You think it's just too big to miss?
Yes. Yeah. No, I think Dana has been saying this recently, and you saw him last week. I think Oscar Willis from Mac Life asked him, and he gave this answer. But this is an answer that I've heard him say, Joey, a lot of times. He said, there's a lot of guys that get out there in front of you, the media, and you ask them, do you want to fight this guy and that guy? And they say, yeah. But then we offer them the fights, and behind the scenes, they say, no. He said, Jon Jones is opposite of that. He said, Jon Jones in the public will say, no, I don't want to fight Aspinall. And behind the scenes, we offer him Aspinall. And he said, yes. I just think it's too big of a fight. The heavyweight division is a mess. Right. If the heavyweight division was as good as some of these other divisions are, where there's so many contenders and so many, legitimate, fights that could be made, maybe I wouldn't be so optimistic. But there is Drek after Jones and Aspinall, right? So they have to wait for somebody to come up. So I think that they will do whatever it takes to get that fight made, and I think they will get it made.
Look, I'm kind of weird about the Jon Jones Aspinall fight. I want that fight. There's no doubt I want that fight. But man, I think about the heavyweight division, and after that fight, let's say Jones wins and retires. Man, the heavyweight division. I mean, it's what happens after? I mean, I don't know. I guess you got Aspinall, who would be coming off a loss to Jones potentially. Unless, I guess the best case scenario would be Aspinall, for the UFC at least, and fans at least, would be Aspinall winning and then a potential rematch between the two. But imagine if like Jones wins and retires, or even if Jones retires and the fight doesn't happen. Man, the heavyweight division is horrible. Let me pass a theory by you that I've been telling my audience for a while. Okay. I don't know, I don't know what the answer is in terms of fighter pay and the UFC profit share. I've never nailed down a specific answer of what it should be. But my take on the heavyweight division has always been, if you're 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", you're athletic and you're 265 pounds or above, you're going to be in the NFL. You're going to be in the NHL. You're going to be in MLB. The last place you're going to be is in the UFC, because regardless of what you think about the pay in all those other major organizations, even as like backup, offensive linemen or wide receivers, I feel like that is one of the reasons that the heavyweight division is as lackluster as it's kind of been. It's never really been stacked. And I'm curious, what do you think about that?
Oh, 100%. No, 100%. I mean, I think you're correct about that. I think, when you look so that probably took place. Like boxing in the 70s had great heavyweights. And then, the heavyweights, there've been a couple periods where there've been better heavyweights and others. The 90s, there were actually quite a few heavyweights, Tyson, but you look at, Tyson, Tyson wasn't great in the 90s. He was better in the 80s, right? But, Riddick Bowe was out there, Tommy Morrison, Ray Mercer, George Foreman, Evander Holyfield, Tyson was still competing. There was other ones, right? There were a lot of good heavyweights, but they were like wide receiver guys, right? But I think your point is extremely well taken. Those guys are now power forwards in the NBA. They're 50 home run hitting first baseman playing for the Mets that, make $57 million, 2-year contract, right? And so it's different. But now when you go into lighter weight classes, right, especially if you get down below, say, welterweight, there's not place for those athletes. So now fighting becomes, now you're competing with golf and tennis and, some other sports like that. And you have a better chance of landing those kind of athletes, right? But most of the pro team sport athletes that we would think of, let's say the big four in the United States: baseball, football, hockey, and basketball. You're basically talking 170 and up, and usually 180 and up, and you got to probably be at least 5'10". If you're 5'6" or 5'7", there's not too, what is it? Jose Altuve is the second baseman for the Astros. He's small, 5'4" or something, but there's not many guys like that. But that 5'4" athlete who's good could make a living in MMA. So I think that is, and boxing, that is really, you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people don't realize that. That's every time someone asks me, like, Joey, why is the heavyweight division so bad? I'm always like, listen, if you're this athletic, the UFC is going to be your last stop. Again, regardless of what you were to think about pay, because the pay, I mean, I would love, imagine being like a backup offensive lineman. You're still getting paid great. You barely have to play. You just got to keep in good shape and keep training, Well,
Major League Baseball, the minimum is $750, right? So, you're making $750 for the minimum, and you're staying first class hotel rooms, flying on charter planes, blah, 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 blah. And then you're making, even the people making the minimum are making over $1 million a year when you get the licensing from MLBPA and all that other stuff that comes in, right? So you're adding, and then if you have an agent that's doing any business for you, even the lower level, players are doing ads in their hometowns and everything. And so they make a little bit of extra money and they do signings. And so there's a lot of money there from to be made. And that is still not the case for fighters, right? There's not a lot. Do you see fighters like when I grew up, Joey, there was fighters all over the place on commercials on TV. The famous commercial when Muhammad Ali opened the right guard commercial, he opened the medicine box cabinet and there, and then he did a right guard commercial and Sugar Ray Leonard with the 7-Up. And, there was so many of them. We just don't see that now.
Yeah, it's true. I don't even feel like you see anything. Like, I remember the last time I even remember anything like super mainstream with fighters was when, was it Anthony Pettis was on like the cereal box or something along those lines? You remember that?
Yeah, Wheaties. He was on the
Wheaties box. Yep. While we're on the topic of heavyweights, let me ask you this. Francis Ngannou, I don't remember the exact number of fights he signed with the PFL, but it wasn't like a long contract. That was one of the things he wanted, was like a smaller contract. Do you, and Dana, this is like a question more of, kind of your relationship with Dana, but do you think there would be any chance, let's say Ngannou starches 2 more bums in PFL, and let's say Jones smokes Aspinall, and then Jones is thinking about retirement, and let's say the fans are really going rabid. Like we find out Ngannou's a free agent, and Ngannou comes out and does an interview and says, look, I'd be willing to sign with the UFC and do this mega fight with Jon Jones, with kind of the lingering bad blood between those two guys. Do you think it would be a possibility at all?
I think it would have been a possibility if Francis was a couple years younger. He brought Tito Ortiz back multiple times. And believe me, no matter what he thinks of Francis Ngannou, he hated Tito Ortiz 100 times worse. Believe me, he hated Tito Ortiz. I was with him times when we were talking about Tito just away, where he just railed on Tito all the time. So if he brought Tito Ortiz back, he was going to fight Tito Ortiz. You don't remember that probably, but no. They had a match scheduled. That was going to be a boxing match. Yeah, they had that match scheduled. It was going to be on Spike TV. But in any event, so he would. But I think the problem is Francis is, look up Francis's age. What is he, 34 now?
No, I think he's older than that. I actually think he's like 37 or 38. I'll look it up right now.
And now, Eric Nix said after the
38.
last fight, 38?
Yep.
Yeah, so no chance because he's got to fulfill that PFL schedule, right? So that's going to take a couple years to do. Plus, he wants to box at least once or twice more in there. So you add those fights in, and given MMA fighters and given Francis, he has not gone to the post that often. That's going to take him 2.5 years to get done. At that point, Tom Aspinall's like 35. I mean. Because isn't Aspinall like 32 now? I think Aspinall is in his 30s.
Yeah, I think he's like 32. He's pretty young. He's probably like 32 as I search Ngannou again. Let me see. But on the bright side, heavyweight he's 31. He's turning 32 in April.
So he'd be like 33, 34.
At least in heavyweight, it seems like the longevity is a little bit better for heavyweights. They can fight until they're like 42 or so, 44 even. I think Couture fought until maybe even later than that. So I don't know. I was just hoping you were going to, because I think it's never going to happen. But Jon Jones and Ngannou has been like my dream fight forever. So I was hoping like maybe, even as pessimistic as I am, I was like maybe Kevin will tell me, oh yeah, man, it'd be, Starches one. Imagine. Oh man, that's
who would win that fight? So that's your dream fight. Who wins the fight?
I don't think anybody beats Jon Jones. I just don't think. I'm going to be honest. This is going to sound crazy, Kevin. I want to see Jon Jones versus Aspinall, right? I really do want to see it. If it never happens, I'll be disappointed. I won't cry about it because I already know who wins. And I said the same thing about Ciryl Gane. And, I got so much shit. I said, I think Jones dominates him and I think Jones wins. I'm so confident that Jones will win. And I even bet on, I don't really bet that often. I'll occasionally throw a bet. I bet on Jon Jones to beat Ciryl Gane within 2 minutes. I was 5 seconds off.
Man,
and I don't remember how much I would have won. Yeah. And imagine how great of a flex that would be. Now, to be fair, I didn't pick him to win it within 2 minutes on my actual prediction, but I picked him to win by stoppage. I don't remember when exactly. I think second round stoppage or something. But I just believe in Jon Jones. If you followed his career, my statement about Jon Jones always, and anybody who watches the channel with any longevity knows this, Jon Jones always fights the perceived level of his opponent. Tom Aspinall's the boogeyman. Tom Aspinall's this freak athlete who's super fast and has crazy power. Jon Jones is going to get up for that fight. Now, could he get clipped in the first round and put away? Sure, he could. But you look at the course of Jon Jones' career, how long has he been around? I don't even know how long his UFC career. He's been fighting since before.
2008 was his first UFC fight.
So he's been around for now 17 years. I barely remember him ever getting hit with a big power shot. Like one of the more cleaner, harder shots I remember was like Lyoto Machida landed like one good shot. A lot of people forget that, I think, in the first round. It wasn't crazy. Gustafsson landed some shots. Reyes landed some shots, but there was never like a shot that was like, oh, this one, a big wind-up punch. And I just think if Aspinall doesn't get him out of there earlier, it's going to be Jon Jones. And I think it's similar for Ngannou.
Here's the thing. When I look at the Ngannou fight, I laugh. He was the rightful UFC champion, but when they were promoting the fight, they were saying the number one heavyweight in MMA. And I mean, say what you want about Jon Jones. I mean, Jon Jones dominated Ciryl Gane. And if Ciryl Gane did not make a stupid move and try to grab the heel hook on Francis in the 5th round, that fight's over, right? Ciryl Gane wins a decision and Francis is not the champion. So, and he got, Ciryl Gane, a kickboxer, was, wrestling with Francis, right? I mean, what would Jon Jones freaking do to Francis? And like you alluded to, I think the great thing about power in combat sports is kind of like what Earl Weaver used to say about the 3-run home run in baseball. It changes everything. And you have that ability to knock somebody out with one punch. It's always there all the time. And so you can, you don't have to grapple them into a certain position. You can just throw that one punch and bingo, you get it. But the odds of Francis landing that punch on Jon Jones to me would be low. And I think Jon Jones would take him down and just pummel him.
I think Francis has a better chance than Aspinall. I think Francis actually beats Aspinall pretty easily. I mean, obviously it's heavyweight. Whoever lands first in Aspinall and Ngannou would probably be it. And, I don't know how the wrestling would play out. I think Aspinall and Ngannou is a very, very intriguing fight.
Aspinall is great on the ground, in my opinion.
Yeah, but I think, here's what I think. I think Jones, I know we're talking about kind of 3 different potential fights with all the different guys we're talking about. I think Jones out-grapples Aspinall. Aspinall, say what you will about how impressive his wins have been. The heavyweight division, again, isn't that skilled in general. His fights haven't been that long. That's not his fault. But I know what we're getting in Jon Jones. You know what I mean? And I know, Tom Aspinall early in his career got out-grappled. That's forever ago. You can look at that and kind of take something away from that. But here's what I think. I think Jon Jones could outstrike both Aspinall and Ngannou at range. And I think he could also take both of them down. To sum it all up, I would take Jones over both of them. I would take Ngannou over Aspinall. And I think I think so highly of Jones. I know it's kind of the fun thing nowadays, and people kind of took what you were doing as well. And I agree with you with the whole Jon Jones pound for pound argument. It was more argument about the circumstances of the inactivity, and
right.
People kind of took that as, oh, let's shit on Jon Jones. But the reality is, if you've watched his career, every single time that people are like, oh, this is a layup, that's when Jones seems to not take it seriously. It ends up being a close fight. And then when he actually fights somebody that you're like, oh, this is the guy that's going to beat him, he goes out there and starches him like Cyril Gane.
I'm going to puff out my chest on two things. And I don't usually brag about myself, but I'm going to brag about myself on two things. In boxing, 2001, Roy Jones, everybody and his brother said Roy Jones was the best pound for pound fighter in the world. It wasn't even close. Floyd Mayweather defeated Diego Corrales, and I said Floyd Mayweather is the best fighter in the world. And everybody called me a moron. And now we have people who I think are morons who say Floyd is the greatest fighter who ever lived. Like they forget Sugar Ray Robinson. But then I said Jon Jones was the number one pound for pound fighter in the world. And at a press conference, Dana and I got into it because he was advocating for Anderson Silva at the time. And I said, Jon Jones with those elbows and that range. And, and he went, Dana was, and hey, it was an opinion. So I'm not criticizing him about it. But his argument was, Anderson's done it for all this period of time, and Jones is just now coming onto the scene. And, but I think when you're rating these guys, like I think you're shortchanging Aspinall's wrestling / grappling ability. I think Jones would probably, I haven't made up my mind 100% Jones and Aspinall. If it was the Jon Jones, say pre-Anthony Smith days, pre-Dominic Reyes days, no doubt I'm going with Jon Jones. But I think we have seen a little bit of drop off in Jon, right? Now, John's drop off because he was so good, he's still one of the best there is, right? Compared to, the rest of the guys. But I think, you look and here, let me just pull John's record up. I just want to go through John's fights since we have a second. Right. So I'm going to pull John's record up here and look at some of these fights that he had where you go, did he look great in these fights? And you remember the argument I said to Dana, hey,
you thought he beat
Reyes beat him. So, the Gustafsson win in the rematch, he looked great in. Comes back against Anthony Smith. Okay, that was close because of the points. But then, Thiago Santos, a lot of people thought he lost. Santos fight pretty good. Dominic Reyes, Dana thought he won. He fought Stipe Miocic. Hey, I think Miocic was better, but 40 plus years old. How motivated was he? Blah, 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 blah. So there are arguments. So I still think it's degrees of greatness. I still think Jon Jones is great, but if he was 100 Madden score 5 years ago, he's maybe a 97.8 Madden score right now, right? Still pretty damn good, but slightly different.
Yeah, for me, I don't know. I just look at Jones's career and just look at the big moments in his career and think, okay, every time they said it was going to be the boogeyman, he came out and looked like the best that he ever looked. And I just see the same thing against Aspinall. And I'll tell you a kind of a hot take that I had. Keep in mind, this was before.
You have a lot of them, Joey.
This was before October. Okay. This is going to piss a lot of the chat off. Luckily, the people in my community don't need to live in an echo chamber. But previous to UFC 308, okay, so previous to Topuria, Holloway, Co-Main, Chimaev, and Whitaker, I said that Khamzat Chimaev was the most underrated fighter on the roster. And I said Tom Aspinall is the most overrated fighter on the roster.
Wow.
Let me get your reaction to that, Kevin, because the chat will all be on your side. There might be some that agree with me. But I just think at heavyweight, man, there's just there's a lot of guys that just aren't that great. And it's like, I get it. Aspinall's running through them, but it's just not that great to me, you know?
I think Aspinall is incredible because I think he has got the one thing that he has that none of the other guys really have is he's got that athletic ability. Forget fighting and everything. He has that quickness and that, that quick twitch muscle movement and everything. And he's fast and quick. And there's not a lot of guys at his size, 6'3", 6'4", 260 pounds that are both fast and quick. And his punches are going to land a little bit faster than anybody Jon has seen, right? That is going to be a fact, a big factor there. Like I have been, some people call me a Khamzat Chimaev mark, right? So when he came into the UFC, I was like, oh my God. And I loved him. And I had him I think he was ranked 6th at welterweight and I had him 6 pound for pound, So like I had him way ranked up higher than everybody else because I thought this guy was unfreaking believable. I kind of dropped him down a little bit because of his activity, right? Because unlike in college football or college basketball, when you have the rankings, you don't move them down that much because they're playing so many games and unless they lose. But in MMA, when you're not fighting but twice a year, like if you go 2 years without fighting or a year and a half without fighting, you have to drop. It's just not right. And so that's kind of why I started to put him down. But I think Khamzat is vastly underrated even now. I think Khamzat, Khamzat be the best pound for pound fighter in the world? How many people did that to Robert Whittaker?
I know. You know what's crazy? Going into that fight, we were looking forward to that fight for a while because remember it was announced for June and then it got moved to October. Right. From the very second that fight was announced, this is a direct quote. Okay, this is not. I'm not adding stuff to it to embellish it. I said, I believe that Khamzat Chimaev will buzzsaw through Robert Whittaker in the first round. That's a direct quote. That's what I said every time. People are like, dude, you're overrating. You're the, they kind of lump Khamzat in with the Dagestani guys. And, oh, you're a Dagestani nut rider, this and that. And sure enough, man, he went out. Could he have put on a better performance? I don't think that he could have. Could he put on a better performance against Whittaker?
I mean, it was just, what was it? 40 seconds. I mean, he
took him down right away.
Ankle pick, take him down, and with a face crank like that, and the strength that it had to take to do what he did. Oh my God. The guy is a freak in nature, right? And I think if he had not gotten COVID, because and I believe he got long COVID, right? And that long COVID has been a big problem for, Jonathan Toews of the Chicago Blackhawks had to retire because of that. I think if he hadn't had that, we would be talking about him as a world champion right now.
Well, let me say this to you, Kevin, about Khamzat while we're on the topic of Khamzat. And then I'm going to read your chat real quick, Grant, because I know it's been up there. People constantly, it drives me nuts. People constantly call Khamzat some type of like pull out merch. You got to go or something, Kevin?
No, I'm just checking the phone.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure you didn't have like your Dana thing. People keep saying, oh, Khamzat's pulling out and he's missing all these fights and this and that and this and that. And I think it's way overblown. Okay, hear me out here. Khamzat Chimaev has missed 2 fights in his entire UFC career. And I know technically on paper that's not correct. But if you look back, it was December of 2020. He was booked against Leon Edwards. Khamzat and Leon both got COVID. Right. Now, what Dana and the UFC did is they said, okay, we're just going to move it a couple weeks and hopefully they can fight then. Khamzat was not recovered. So I don't consider that a second pullout. It was just they tried to move it. Remember, they tried to move, I think, a Raul Rosas Jr. fight. It didn't come to fruition. Then they said, okay, we'll push it a couple more weeks. And then I think it was like the beginning of March. It was supposed to happen mid-January.
That was crazy how that kept changing.
They kept pushing it. And then Khamzat still wasn't recovered. So people look at it as, oh, Khamzat pulled out of these 3 fights. The first fight, they were both sick when it got canceled, and then he just never recovered, and they just kept pushing it, kicking the can down the line.
But he wasn't able to fight for a long period of time. It's not pulling out of a specific fight. He was not, no matter who they wanted him to fight, you or me or anybody else, he wasn't ready to fight. And that was what the question was, right? So I think that's where the big issue came, Joey, is that, he just didn't have, he didn't have the ability, but he was sick, right? Like, I think, you look at it that, that was bad at the time. Right. And he was really, really sick. And, even when he pulled out of the Whittaker fight the first time and Alascaro jumped in, look at what he was doing. Now that was training sickness that he had. But when you hear him tell the story of how ill he was, It's scary, right? And so that like if you look at it, that's the only knock on his armor is like, I mean, he's powerful. Look at the GM3 fight, and go to other fights, right? That he had. And obviously we know he's a great grappler. I think, if his chink in his armor, if he has one, is just that he's, he hasn't been always healthy and able to get to the post.
Yeah, it just drove me nuts because I feel like realistically he's pulled out of 2 fights ever. The Leon Edwards original matchup. Imagine had they gave him 6 months to recover because obviously he was dealing with this ailment. And then, of course, the Whitaker fight was the second one. I kind of famously joked in the lead up to the fight because a lot of people were saying, man, hopefully Khamzat shows up and this and that. And I remember looking at Whitaker's career, and I think he had the same amount of pullouts or, a little bit, maybe one more. And I was like, and I was
Right.
kind of joking around saying, yeah, I hope Robert Whitaker shows up so we can actually see if how good Khamzat Chimaev is. But Grant Dixon, sorry, I've been meaning to read this. Will Kevin please ask Bilal who is next to get dumped on their bald spot? So in case you don't know that joke, Kevin, and by the way, if Bilal ever says if Bilal ever says this came from me. You remember that takedown that he had against Leon Edwards where he picked him up and dumped him on his head?
Yeah.
In my live stream, it was either right as it happened or right afterwards. I was like, oh my God, he dumped him on his bald spot. And so that kind of became the narrative, like who's Bilal going to dump on his bald spot next? I'm assuming it's going to be Shavkat. I don't know what other fight
Shavkat
they would
for sure.
do now.
I think it's in May.
Isn't there rumors of them going to Chicago? Do you think they're going to put that in Chicago? I know
I
there's
think
Canada.
that fight, from what I've heard, that fight's going to be May. So that's
wherever
where
they end up.
I believe they're going to go to Montreal in May.
Yeah. Okay. So then I guess that's where it's going to be. I thought I heard at one point they were going back to Chicago this year, and I thought, oh, that makes perfect sense. Have Bilal headline, in Chicago would make a lot of sense for him. But there you go. Shavkat in May, most likely. Okay. Don't go with all the weird Twitter warriors. Don't go out there and say Kevin reported that. All right. Let's see what Huzefa said. Huzefa, shout out to Huzefa for the $9.99. I fully believe Khamzat has fixed all his health issues via the thyroid surgery along with his training location. He will be triple champion soon. I mean, that all depends on if he gets the fights. I mean, he's been promised a title shot for ages. He hasn't gotten that yet. But I think he runs through Pereira right now. I don't know what you have to say about the health issues, Kevin, or what you think about his triple champ.
Well,
prospects.
zero. Less. I have as good a chance of being a triple champion as him because of the weight issue, right? He's not going to 170. So, forget 170. So unless you're saying he's going to be the heavyweight champion, because he's a middleweight, and think about it, right? He's going to fight probably the winner of DDP and Strickland, almost certainly, will be next. So how does he navigate that? Because then you're going to say he's got to go down to 170 after being the 185 champ, then go up to 205 to do it. Zero chance of that. So that is not happening. Now, would he be a 2-division champion? Hey, I told you before, I got called a mark on Khamzat Chimaev, and I said, God bless you. Go ahead and call me that. I think this guy is an unbelievable fighter. And so I'll stake my reputation that Khamzat Chimaev has a better chance of doing what I say he's going to do than all these other guys that people, say are superstars and blah, 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 blah. But 3-division champion, no.
What do you think about, I know it's, unlikely to happen anytime soon, but what would you think about a potential Chimaev versus Pereira matchup at light heavyweight? Who would you pick in that matchup? Because I'm easily picking Khamzat all day.
I think it's a fight, right? Because again, Pereira does have jiu-jitsu. He's not great. He's not the greatest black belt ever, but he has some jiu-jitsu. And his power is going to be a legit thing, and he's going to have range on Khamzat that I don't think Khamzat ever fought before. But I look at it this way. If Israel Adesanya can knock out Alex Pereira, so can Khamzat Chimaev. So I think, I would lean to Khamzat. Timing of fights a lot of times also plays, a role. I think both guys can win the fight when they fight and where they are. If one of them's coming off a really hard fight and the other one's coming off a 30-second, submission, that makes a difference too. But do I think he can beat Alex Pereira and become the light heavyweight champion? Yes.
Yeah, I think the grappling would be too much. I'd pick Khamzat in the first round against Pereira. I know that sounds insane, and now I know there's going to be some people who maybe watch this back later and be like, man, this is a Chimaev love fest. These guys love Chimaev, whatever it's going to be. I think Pereira, getting ragdolled in the first round by Jan Blachowicz, I think Khamzat up at 205 would be able to really take Pereira down and probably find a submission.
Pereira's a black belt right now. I don't think he is the level of black belt that a lot of these guys are, right? He's no Demi and Maya as a black belt, but he does have the ability to defend himself on the ground, and he is going to have this, that huge power. And we saw it against Khalil Roundtree, Joey. You don't have to knock him out in the first round to be landing. And I think, that Roundtree, that all just accumulated. And I think that, that's going to be something on Khamzat that, he would have to overcome, is to not be getting popped in the face by that jab.
Yeah. What are some challenges that MMA media face that many may not know of?
I mean, it's crazy. Like, just interviews following through, guys. Like, a lot of times when I was like, yesterday I interviewed Alexander Topuria. So this isn't even a major challenge, but the app that you're using, I use the StreamYard. Yeah. Apparently in Australia, StreamYard is really hard to use. Now, when I interviewed DDP, I had StreamYard set up. I have my graphics on there. I have my intro. And then they said he can't get in. I had to go down, get a Zoom thing. And, I'm trying to hurry up because he's only got a certain period of time. And, people are going, oh, the screen or the whatever, you didn't have your graphics on the screen. It's like, I either had to say, I'm going to take DDP now and do it on the fly, switch, or I didn't get him. The same thing happened with Tatiana Suarez, and the same thing yesterday happened with Alexander Topuria. All three of them couldn't get on StreamYard, and I had to switch at the last minute. And, you don't get called back from people sometimes, I could go out there and say, I heard this. And there's a lot of rumors I heard, but you saw me today. I did not write that Jake Paul is fighting Canelo, done deal. That's been reported that it's a done deal. I speculated about it the other day, but I'm not going to write about it now until the fight is a done deal. And it's not always easy because things change, right? Yesterday, Ring Magazine reported Terrence Crawford is fighting Canelo, done deal. Today, the fight is off. And those are things like people tell you things and you go with one source and it becomes an issue.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Here's a great question for you that I've actually wanted to ask somebody who's more kind of involved in the media scene. The Mac Life posted an article reporting Conor McGregor versus I forgot which one brother what Conor McGregor versus Logan Paul. They did an article, Conor McGregor, Logan Paul, $150 million fight or whatever it may be. And that was out for about 3 weeks, and I had covered it. And usually when I do a video, I link all the sources in the description. One, because especially if I'm using an interview or something, I feel better about using that, linking it. But also, it's a great spot to go back. Oh, where did I find this at? And I go back, a couple, maybe a week later after I linked that there, and I go back and it says 404 page down. What do you make of something like that? Because the Mac Life is considered a credible source, and then that's just kind of a really bad look. You're reporting that, and you don't even post a retraction. You just delete it off your website.
Well, yeah. Let me say this. So I'm going to start by saying, first of all, who is the owner of the Mac Life?
Sorry, I was taking a drink. Conor McGregor.
Yes. Okay, that's number one. Now, number two, Oscar Willis, I think, is a fantastic reporter, good interviewer, accurate, and he can fight, right? So, Oscar Willis, that article was not by Oscar Willis. I did not recognize the name of who that was by, but it was wrong. And you remember, you texted me that day. I knew it was not accurate because I had talked to somebody high level in UFC a day or two before, and nothing going on with Conor, and this was just like on the QT. This wasn't anything that I was going to write. I just was like, hey, where we stand. I wanted to be ready in case something came down. Then this Mac Life story came out. So I texted a very prominent person that you may have heard of in the UFC. And I said, this story on Mac Life says that Logan Paul is fighting Conor. And I got back in all caps, absolute effing BS. And so I think I texted you and you saw that I did not put that, I didn't write anything about it. Like sometimes people say, like what I hate, one of the things that happens on a lot of websites, and it's smart for business, you get clicks, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to say so-and-so website reported that this is going to happen unless I know they're really credible. And I did that, on Monday when I wrote a story on Terrence Crawford in Ring Magazine, and saying that he was going to potentially fight Canelo Alvarez. I said, I cannot independently confirm this, but Turki Al-Sheikh owns Ring Magazine, and he is the person who is negotiating with Canelo Alvarez and Terrence Crawford. Ergo, we would have to assume that the unnamed source here is Turki Al-Sheikh, and that this is a credible report. Well, it turns out it fell apart the next day. We don't know what happened. Normally I don't report those kind of things. Like I did not report the Logan Paul Conor McGregor thing because I didn't think there was any truth to it. I could have said, hey, it's BS, and gotten a lot of clicks on people reading a story that said nothing. To me, that's not ethical. Now, if ESPN reports it, I have to respect that outlet and say ESPN is very good and they have really strict standards, and if they are reporting it, even if it turns out not to be true, they know something that is going on, and I'm going to report that ESPN. But some of these websites that report things, you got to be really, 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 really careful.
Yeah, it's especially in MMA, but I feel like in general, the internet is a sea of like fake news and misinformation and disinformation. And it's like trying to weed through, especially when you have all these like Instagram and Twitter clout chasers trying to, get clicks off of fake news. And what I tend to do is, because I'll cover some speculation, especially if I think, okay, this seems maybe legitimate. And I'm not using any of these like fake Twitter guys or Instagram guys. But what I try to do, at least from my perspective, is not, I don't consider myself like a reporter. I just consider myself kind of like a commentator, right. type. It's just different than like a like when people say, "Hey, Joey, you're a good journalist." I'm not a journalist. I'm not investigating anything, But what I try to do is just make it very clear. Like, look, this is my educated guess. This is why I believe it. There are some rumors. Like, for example, I covered recently Islam versus Topuria, and I said, listen, and I say in the very beginning, this is not official. This is not confirmed. I don't put that in the title. And then I say, look, I believe this, and then here is why. But I feel like nowadays, man, for me, it's extra annoying, like the Twitter and the Instagram accounts, because then I constantly get asked about, hey, man, what do you think about this fight news? Like, remember, it's going to be Khamzat versus Pereira. I know we were just speculating about, a hypothetical fight, but do you remember like a month ago, people were acting like that fight was like official? Right. And then what you also have is you have other content creators who will then take that from Twitter or take it from Instagram, and maybe they don't do it maliciously, but then they kind of report it, and then it almost seems more credible. And it's one of those things where it's just a massive clusterfuck, and it can be so annoying how, you have to, kind of fight off all this wrong information 24/7. And I'm sure you see it more now that you're doing like live streams and stuff like that. I'm sure you go to a live stream and everyone's like, hey man, what do you think about Chimaev versus Pereira being official for 315? And you're like, that fight's not.
And I didn't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to say this, like, President Trump in his first term, coined the phrase fake news, and I've heard it a million times and it's out there. But here's what I want to say about that. I want to defend journalists. And I think in the MMA space is a good example of this, right? I said before, I praised a lot of my colleagues. I just praised Oscar Willis. I'll praise a lot of the other ones. I think there are a lot of really talented, people. But there's a lot more that are just, they're truck drivers and, whatever else they do. And they consider themselves a reporter because they do what you do, right? And maybe not it. You do it well, and you produce quality content, but not everybody does. But now, are they media, and should I be lumped in with them? I went to journalism school. I've gone to seminars, and I have 45 plus years of experience professionally doing this. And if I make a mistake, I correct it and I say that I made a mistake. Should I be lumped in with them? No, it's not like I'm a cook and I cook my dinner at home. Am I a restaurateur? Are they going to call me, hey, should I be compared to Gordon Ramsay and say, okay, Kevin Iole and Gordon Ramsay are both chefs, right? No, there's a difference. And, you may not like, my writing style, or you may not like me personally, or you may not like my opinions. But I will tell you the one thing that I know, and I know people don't, people believe what they want to believe. My ethics are such that I am going to say what I believe in every single case. And I'm going to say what I know to be true in every single case. And if that agrees with the popular narrative, so be it. If that is the other side of it, so be it. I'm just going to do it the way I do it. But I don't think it's fair to compare me to these 19, 18, 20-year-old kids who are writing things and popping up on, Instagram and Twitter. And then, is that person a journalist? Right. I think that's not fair to compare me and say they are media.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think people are I feel like the MMA community as a whole, and maybe this, broader happens, in media in general, but it's like, it's kind of like Instagram models. Like anyone can be a model nowadays. Anyone can be a quote unquote media member. And the big difference is I feel like a lot of these accounts, whether it be a Twitter account, whether it be an Instagram account, whether it be a YouTube account like mine, I feel like a lot of people, what they try to do is they fake announcements. And what they're doing is, and I referenced this, I think earlier, they throw shit at the wall and they pray that it sticks. So like me, I say, okay, look, I think Islam versus Topuria, it seems like that makes sense considering what Dana's teasing. Here's why I believe it. It's not like I'm acting like I have some source that I'm reporting it or it's definitely going to happen. But I feel like some people, and don't get me wrong, I'll take a victory. If it ends up happening, I'll be like, look, I called it back then. But I feel like what a lot of people do is they say it broadly, Islam Makhachev versus Ilia Topuria official. And then even though it's not official right then, and they don't have any sources, they don't have any real information,
right,
they're just kind of throwing shit at the wall and they're acting like they do. And then if it does end up being official, even if they get 10 other wrong, it won't matter. People will act like they are some type of media member or journalist. And it is a very, interesting dichotomy.
Here's the tricky thing from our standpoint, Joey, that becomes an issue, right? Like it never used to be this way, but with social media out there, you could be in the gym running on a treadmill and the person next to you is some UFC fighter or some UFC manager. And you say, Javier Mendez is next to you. Hey, who is Islam fighting next? Oh, I think he's going to fight Ilia next, right? And now we never heard of this website. This person has no credibility. There's been no reports of Islam and Topuria. Is that true or is that not true? Do I say, hey, there was a published report? There's no, and so you have to, it makes it really hard to vet. And now, another difficult thing, Dana no longer even denies things, right? He'll say, did we announce it?
Did we announce it?
Did we announce it? If we announced it, it's true. And, and so now you don't even know, like, hey, if I have a source, the manager, somebody in the camp that I know knows, and, or, sometimes the fighter will tell you, like, I can't let this out, but right, whoever it is, if I know that that's true, then hey, it doesn't have to be done for me to report it. But if I don't have an independent source that confirmed that I feel comfortable with, and I should tell you this story when I used Dana as a source and it was wrong, and I looked like an idiot one time.
Yeah.
That was a lesson to be learned. But yeah, so it's really difficult in this modern space now to weed out all the stuff that's accurate and not accurate.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, because I'm like trying to weed it out for people who watch the channel, and I'm like, look, I'm not ever trying to give you guys bad information. So it's like sometimes you might be late to the party with something, but you got to just be more mindful that there's so much fake news. Huzefa, thank you for the 199. Khamzat can be heavyweight champ 100% eventually. I don't know about heavyweight champ. I think that's a bit of a stretch. I'm a big Khamzat believer, Kevin. I don't know what you think of that.
No.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it. Unless if Pereira wins the heavyweight title, I'll be with you, Yuzefa, because I think you could out-grapple Pereira. Kevin, we've almost been live for 2 hours. We'll end on this.
I'm guessing there's no Dana tonight, so
you're not going to end up getting the interview with doing the interview with Dana.
3:00. It's 3:00, and so it's going to have to happen soon.
It's 3 p.m. in Australia right now. Is that what time it is? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I know two things. I've seen this guy asking this question a million times, so I'll read this out loud. Well, I don't even. Okay, hold on. I lost it. DDP versus Poatan, more likely than Chimaev at 205. And I think somebody said, who do we think wins between DDP and Poatan? And I seen that earlier. Does DDP beat Khamzat and Poatan? That was the question. Kevin, I'll let you go first.
I would lean toward Khamzat against DDP. I think it'll be a fight, right? You know, it's one of those 51-49, 50.1 to 49.9 fights. But I would lean to Khamzat there. Does Khamzat get to Poatan first? I mean, I think the winner. Well, that's a complicated question because we have Ankalaev that may have something to say about that, right? He's fighting in March. So that becomes an issue. But I guess I would say that, the winner of Khamzat DDP is going to be the one, that'll be at get Poatan first. And I guess I would say I lean slightly toward Chimaev.
If DDP and Poatan did fight, who would you favor in that one? Like if
DDP lean toward Alex. I think, I don't think Dricus's wrestling is as good as, and I don't think he's as dangerous on the ground as Khamzat would be. And so as a result, I think Alex would knock him out.
Yeah, I think I would pick Khamzat over DDP. I would pick DDP over Pereira at 185 if Pereira came back down.
Well, I was talking light heavyweight when I comment.
If DDP goes up to 205, I would take Pereira. I think it'd be very interesting because DDP is kind of clumsy and sloppy, but it's effective. I think you could probably out-grapple Pereira, especially at 185, a weight-trained Pereira. Plus, he has a granite chin, it seems. But up at 205, I just feel like Pereira's not going to be weight-trained. He's going to be massive. He's going to be accurate. He's going to clip him with a left hook and sleep him in the first round. Let me read this real quick, and then we'll wrap this up. Kevin, I really appreciate you joining me I know this was like last second. I know I told it, for those of you who weren't here in the beginning of the stream, I was texting Kevin about one of the articles he read. And then I said, hey, I'm about to go live in like an hour. If you want to join me, because he popped into the chat the other day. So we just randomly did this last second. But it's been a great conversation. I'm sure you guys have been enjoying it. By the way, I haven't done it yet, but I'll link Kevin Ioli's channel down in the description. If you guys want to go subscribe to his channel, I'll leave the stream up for a bit. Let's see what Grant says. Grant says, thoughts on Aspinall getting a new defense dog? Does this give him a better chance against Jones?
Are they German Shepherds?
You took the words right out of it. Is it a German Shepherd? Maybe a Belgian Malinois, I think is how you pronounce it. It all depends on the breed. If it's a poodle, I'll say no. If the dog is over 100 pounds, I'll say yes. Thank you for the $9.99.
You don't think Aspinall has a Lhasa Apso, do you?
I don't even know what kind of dog is that.
It's about that big.
Oh, it's a small dog. Yeah, you have those Basset hounds, right? That's what makes you feel
right here.
Yeah, I think after we talked about that the first time I had you on, I sent you a picture of my dog. I got a 120-pound Cane Corso, so I think I got a chance against Jones with that dog. That's one thing.
With that dog, yeah, I would not. I mean, I might not favor that dog against a tiger or a lion, but a lot of other animals, I think I'm in.
Do you know those massive bones that they sell in the? Yeah, it's adorable. How old is your dog?
He turned 8 last month.
Do you know those? My dog's turning 4 this year, I believe. That's crazy. You ever go through the pet store and you see those huge, like gigantic, like probably like 10-pound dog bones?
Oh yeah.
Let's see if it focuses.
Pull it back.
Oh, there it goes.
Yeah. Oh my God.
He carries that around the house. He carries that around the house.
That looks like a Flintstone thing.
All the time. Here, I'll show you one more picture. You can really see. Keep in mind, he's about 120 pounds. Here's his full size. Hold on. It'll take a second.
Oh, my God.
He carries that up and down the steps. I'm like, what are you doing? When he drops it on the floor, it's absolute insane. It's like, boom. I'm like, what are you doing?
Does he come on to bed with you?
He does, but not. That's a floor bone. If he tries to bring that, because that bone kind of stinks a little bit. If he brings that up on bed, I'm like, all right, get on the floor. His name is Colombo is his name. So, Kevin.
One more thing.
Go ahead. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you. We did 2 hours here. I might still do I'm going to end this. So everyone can watch this on a replay. I might do a little bit of another stream after this if you guys care to join me in a little bit. But Kevin, thank you for joining me. If there's anything you want to shout out before we go, man.
KevinIoli.com, as you see behind me, and YouTube.com/Kevin Ioli. Appreciate you subscribing there and going to my website and checking out my work. Appreciate you guys.
Yep. Like the stream, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys later.
See ya.